Hey guys, in this Python tutorial for beginners video, I'm going to install Python on my computer along with PyCharm, which is my favorite Python IDE. I think you're really making a good choice by learning Python because it's one of the most sought after languages that most employers really look for. Plus Python's popularity is growing like crazy. More and more programmers and other developers are moving their projects over to Python every day, because it's very easy to use and it's a very powerful language. So this tutorial is going to be created mostly using Windows 10, but if you're using Macs or Linux, it's going to everything's going to pretty much work the same way. So you should be able to install it and follow the tutorials with that. So the first thing we're going to do is to actually install Python on my computer. But first we need to check and see if it's already on there. So let's go to the search bar and we'll open PowerShell really quick. So here's PowerShell, and once it's open we're going to type Python -- version. See, it doesn't list anything there, which means Python's not currently installed on this computer. Were it installed on this computer, it would actually list the version and everything there of Python that's currently installed. So now that I know Python isn't installed on my computer, I need to download it and install it. So I'm going to just open up a browser. I'm using Chrome. You can use whatever you want. And I'm going to search on Python download. And so I'm going to go to here at python.org. I'm going to click here. So see, it detected that I'm running Windows, so it shows me that version. Were I using Linux or Mac, I can see that it's got the other versions here, and I could download that if I wanted to, and it would work pretty much the same way. But for my system, I'm going to go ahead and click here to download Python 3.8.3, and then I'm going to save it to the desktop. It might take just a second, for that to save. So it looks like it's already done. So I'm going to go ahead and close the browser, and then I'm going to double click on the installer, and hopefully it'll launch. So it gives you some options here. Install the launcher for all users. I'm going to go ahead and leave that selected, and I'm going to go ahead and add Python to the path as well. That way I won't have to go back and do it later if I need to. So then I'm just going to click on install now, and I'm going to hit yes. I do want to allow it to install. And so this may take just a minute to run through it. So I'm going to go ahead and let that run and get it installed. Hopefully it won't take too long. So I can see it running through all the different files it needs to install. Okay, so it says setup was successful. I'm going to close. And so now remember when we checked PowerShell earlier to see if Python was installed and it didn't show us anything. So we're going to go back to PowerShell, and we're going to do that same Python -- version and see what it says. Yep, see where it said, now it says that Python 3.8.3 is installed on our machine. So now we've downloaded and installed Python on our computer. So now that Python's installed and we verified that, the next thing we need to do is we're going to download PyCharm, which is an IDE or an integrated development environment for Python. And basically an IDE is really just a text editor with some other development tools built in that makes it easier to develop software in a particular language. But really, when you install Python, so before we install PyCharm, let's look at this. When you install Python, it also installs its own little IDE called idle. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that real quick just to make sure everything's working right. So you can see how basic this is, right? It's just a basic little text editor. So I'm going to go ahead and type in print hello world. Just like that, and then if everything's working correctly, when I hit enter, it should actually just print hello world to the screen. So yeah, it does print hello world. So it looks like our Python installation is up and running properly. So I'm going to close this down, and I'm going to go ahead and delete that really just to get it off the desktop. But so now to download PyCharm, I'm going to open up a browser again, and then I'm just going to search for a PyCharm download. And so here it is. We can click here to download PyCharm. So when we get to this window here, we can choose whether we want the professional or the community. Of course, it already has Windows selected because it detects that I'm running Windows. And we're going to download the community version because it's free and open source. So I'm going to click on download there. And it says my download started. There it is. So I'm just going to download this to the desktop as well, just like I did the Python installation a minute ago. So let me click save. And it looks like it's going to take maybe just a minute to do that. So I will go ahead and pause right here, and I'll come back to you after this is downloaded. Okay, so now that PyCharm has finished downloading, I'm going to go ahead and close the browser. And you see, here it is. Here's the installer for PyCharm. So I'm going to go ahead and double click that to get it launched. And it might take just a minute to start. So yes, I'm going to allow it to make changes. And so welcome to the Community Edition setup. I'll hit next. And I'll just leave the installation path as default. That's fine. Now for this, I am going to create a desktop shortcut for a launcher, and I'll update the context menu and also create associations to .py, and then I'll hit next. I'll just click through, let it install. There's a good bit of stuff, so it might take just a minute to get it to install. But once it installs, we'll run through the launching it and doing a couple of little settings that we want to make before we get started using PyCharm. Looks like it's going pretty fast, actually. Still going. Not as fast as I thought, I guess. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and click finish to close the setup. And now that I've installed it, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the installer. And so here we have the launcher for PyCharm. So I'm going to go ahead and open it. It may take just a second since it's brand new. I'm going to go ahead and confirm the licensing. I'm going to say no to that. So here we go. I'm going to use the light theme just because I think it might be a little easier for you guys to see. Featured plugins. I don't think I'm going to install any of those. I think I'll just go straight to PyCharm. Okay, so this is the main window that comes up when you actually install PyCharm. Okay, so now that we have PyCharm open, we're going to go ahead and just to make sure it works, we're going to create a new project. So when this screen comes up, it's basically just showing you the location that's going to save your project to. But on the end, it says Untitled, and that's highlighted. That's so you can give your new project a name that you want. So we'll go ahead and call this PyTest. And so down here, it just shows you the location of the virtual environment and the interpreter that it's going to be using. And I'll just hit create. And this should create the PyTest project with all the various components of the project that we need. Let me go ahead and maximize this. So, well, maybe I'll have to wait, but I'll maximize it in just a minute so you guys can see it better. And it is creating a virtual environment right now for me to develop my test application in. There we go. So you can see that it did create the PyTest project for us. So what we need to do, there's a project here, but it's basically blank, right? All it has is just a virtual environment in it. So we need to right click on it and tell it that we want to create a file. So we're going to make a new Python file. And I'll just go ahead and call this the same thing. I'll call it pytest.py. So all Python files need to have a .py extension. So we'll create that. And so you see it's created now. Here's pytest.py, but it's empty. So we're going to go ahead and do the same test. We're going to make sure that, so we already know that Python is installed on the computer and working. So now we're going to make sure that we can actually use PyCharm to write a Python application and use it to execute it and make sure that works. So we're just going to do the same thing. I'm going to do print, and then in parentheses, or in the parentheses, I'm going to type in hello world surrounded by double quotes. Right, so there's that. So now, if I want to try to run this application, I just hit run, and then I go to this green arrow here that says run. And it's telling me to choose a configuration. So I'm just going to use the configuration it's already generated for me, the PyTest configuration. And then you can see down here it shows me the output. It does in fact print hello world, and it says it finished with an exit code of 0. If you are unfamiliar with that, basically anytime you run an application and get an exit code of 0, 0 is usually for success. So the program ran properly and it executed. So you can see that it printed out hello world to the console. So now I think I can just close this, and I'll say yep, exit. So what we've done today is we've gone through and installed Python on our Windows 10 machine and made sure that it actually worked, and then we used idle to make sure we could write a little program with it, and we could. So from there we went and installed PyCharm, which is an IDE to make it easier to use Python. We installed that, did a little bit of setup on it, and then we did another hello world application just to make sure that PyCharm is working in concert with the Python we have installed. And it is. So I hope you guys learned a lot, and I appreciate it. Thanks.